First, we will have a panel discussion on career opportunities in academia. We had requested the 62 participants to put in their questions beforehand in a Google Sheet, and I have sort of summarized it into 3 categories, and we will take up this with the panel. So now I would like to welcome the panelist, Dr. Shobhana Narasimhan. If you can switch, if it's possible to switch on the, yeah. From JNCASR, then Dr. Nishita Desai from TIFR, Dr. Saroj Nayak from IIT Bhubaneshwar, and Dr. Srinivasan from IIT Guwahati. So to start this, I would request the panelists to say a few words about themselves, and then we take the questions. We can start with Dr. Shobhana Narasimhan.
Hello, I'm a condensed matter theorist. I've been on the faculty at JNCASR in Bangalore for 25 years now. My subfield is computational nanoscience. And in addition to my physics interests, I also have a lot of interest in supporting minorities in physics, in particular women in physics, and also people from developing countries who are doing physics. And I've been doing career development workshops for these groups for a long time. So I have some experience in advising young people on how to advance their careers. Thank you. I look forward to this discussion, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel.
Thank you. Dr. Nishita Desai.
Yeah, thank you, organizers, for the invitation. It was really a pleasure and a surprise to be asked. So I am perhaps the youngest of the panelists here, so I'm not sure how much perspective I can offer you, but I'm always open to questions, and I'm happy to share any of my experiences if that is useful to you. So I am currently a Ramanujan Fellow at Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and my research is in what we call particle physics phenomenology, which essentially is linking the very heavily mathematical theories of particle physics to the actual observations that are made at experiments. So my work involves a lot of simulation and interpreting data and trying to figure out what exactly the data is telling us, and what theories can we throw out of the window because what the data doesn't agree with them. So that is yeah, that's all about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Saroj Nayak.
Yeah, so thank you again for this invitation. And my name is Saroj Nayak. I'm a professor and dean faculty at IIT Bhubaneshwar. I joined IIT Bhubaneshwar about 6 years ago. Before that, I was a tenured faculty at Rensselaer. Before that, I was at Princeton. My research interest is on condensed matter, and sub-area is nanobio. I also happen to be a co-founder of the first startup from IIT Bhubaneshwar. So its name is Karma, which employs about 30 people now. And among other things, we have introduced, the Karma has introduced the first solar micropump in India. Last year with MIT, we introduced the first flexible solar panel integrated with irrigations, and now that is adopted by UN in different countries other than India. And I'll be happy to interact with you for the next few minutes, and looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Dr. Srinivasan.
Yeah, good evening. I'm an experimentalist focusing on condensed matter physics, bit of applied materials and instrumentation, because my background is from both sides, from instrumentation and condensed matter physics. I'm one of those early faculty members who joined IIT Guwahati very early, back in maybe 25 years back, and literally grew up with the institution. So in that process, being a new IIT, we had to to a lot of administration. So I gone through all the rigors, right from being a warden up to being several deanships. I've been dean faculty twice. And in fact, I'm currently the interim registrar because our registrar left about a few months back, so I had to stand up for him. So we actually, if you want to know about my background, it's like this. So we have seen this IIT grow from a number of faculty being around 10 to almost 400 now. And probably I've been at least 2 points of pushing up the faculty strength from probably from 2 digits to 3 digits, and then from say something around 200 to around 300. That was the kind of background I have. And I open to questions, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. So we have an excellent panel to address the questions here. So what I will do, I'll pose a question and any one of you could start the answer and others can add. The first from the 22 set of questions which participant put up was, in general, what are the opportunities of careers in academic line? So would any one of you like to start? Yeah, I mean.
May I?
Yeah.
See, in academic institution, you have two type of careers. Like you can take the technical line or the scientific line, or the faculty side. And I would rather recommend taking the faculty side because that comes with the maximum freedom and the kind of respect compared to the other technical side. Like, you know, there are people who have also gone to centers and other places where they mainly focus on research, like being scientific officer and so on. But other track is to join as assistant professor and grow up to be a professor. So these are the two possibilities you have in any institution, academic institution.
Yeah. Professor Nayak, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so I think these are the two lines that Professor Srinivasan mentioned about the academics. I think I don't know whether you will call academics to the people who are in the space research, DRDO and other labs. And they're fairly, I would say, you know, research intensive and PI-driven research happens. So, but as Professor Srinivasan mentioned, that if you want to have both teaching and research, then of course you will go to, you know, institutions like universities and IITs.
Professor Shobhana Narasimhan, you want to add?
Yeah, so I would say that the academic institutions in India, there are the research institutes and there are the universities. And it is unfortunate that in India, what has evolved is that the sort of high-powered research has been carried out mostly in the research institutes, and the universities have become mostly teaching institutions. Of course, there are exceptions. There are certain universities where you see very good research being done, and you see certain people in universities who are doing excellent research. But this is how the situation is right now. There are institutions like the IITs and the IISERs, which are somewhere in between, where you would have a rather heavy teaching load, but you are also expected to be extremely high performing in terms of your research output. So depending on whether you want to teach or whether you really want to do research, you can choose amongst these institutions. I should say that there is a lot of effort being put in right now to change this, to put more teaching emphasis on teaching in the research institutes, to encourage them to have more courses, to admit undergraduates, etc. But typically, the research institutes, you will not have undergraduates, you will only have graduate students. That is, you may or may not have master's students, and you will have PhD students. And in the universities, you will have a very heavy teaching load, but again, there are various programs which have been put in place by the government to try and increase the research culture in the universities. But this is how I would see the situation at present.
Okay. Dr. Nishita Desai, how would one then choose which one to go, research institute versus institutes or universities?
Yeah, I think that's a very complicated question to answer, and partly also the state of the field is such that you might not always have the choice. So it is definitely true that it is an extremely competitive direction if you want to go into it. And so therefore you might necessarily not have a choice of choosing one over the other. In my personal opinion, it always helps to do a little bit of teaching, mainly because I think when you are studying yourself, you don't have the benefit of perspective, which you get when you start teaching. So I've heard this certainly from my senior colleagues and also people who are at the same career stage at me and just starting to teach, that it really opens up your sort of worldview when you start teaching, because you start seeing things in a perspective that you had not seen before. So I don't think that there is anything specifically wrong with picking a teaching institute, but of course you should try and sort of sort out your priorities of what exactly it is that you want. That's the best I can say for now.
Okay. One other question which has frequently come up from the participant in this Google document is, how does one prepare one's CV so that institutes get interested? So Professor Srinivasan, would you like to say something on this?
Right. In fact, most of these institutions have their own application format. So it's not like a corporate sector where you have a worry about a CV and a beautiful CV and all that. Usually, it's actually, comes to much simple things. In fact, you start with asking your academic qualifications, then about your publications, and then other things. I mean, these are very straightforward. Almost all institutions have a format. That's one thing you have to understand. You don't have to really worry about your a colorful CV and all that. But of course, there will always be something like, a write-up asked, where they may ask you about what are your immediate plans or the future plans of either in the teaching or in the research side. So there actually probably you have to pen down a few things in a nice way. But other than that, CV may not be a compulsion for applying for these kind of jobs in academics.
Yeah. Can I say something here?
Yeah,
please. I have a slightly different view on this. I actually think preparing a good CV is extremely important because you need it again and again. I mean, it's true, of course, as Professor Srinivasan said, that increasingly many places you apply online. So the format is kind of fixed. But I still think you should prepare for yourself an all-purpose CV, which you can make use of when filling in online forms. And I think my experience over the last 25 years is that many Indian students, many Indian postdocs don't have good CV making skills. And I get a lot of CVs which I think are very poorly made. They put information which is unnecessary and important information they leave out. So we recently actually in JNC, for this reason, we had a CV making workshop. So I think you should have an all-purpose CV which has all kinds of information, but then you should tailor your CV according to what position you're applying for, also what country you're applying for, because if you're, for example, finishing your PhD and you're applying for a postdoc, then you have to put different kinds of information. Also, different countries expect different things. For example, in the US, it is considered inappropriate. Professor Nayak can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think it's inappropriate to put your date of birth, to put your marital status, to put your gender, Whereas in India, this is standard. You put all this. And in Europe, it seems to be somewhere in between. A lot of people put it, but it won't put off someone. It won't be considered inappropriate for you to mention this. But, I get CVs where people say, their wife's name, their children's names, all this, their children's ages. All this should, in my opinion, just not be there in the CV. If it's for an academic position, I think you should not list hobbies. You should not say in a district level competition for poetry writing, you got 3rd prize, that kind of thing. You should not say I won some quiz. I mean, people say my hobbies are surfing the internet. This doesn't make you look good. It actually makes you look bad. I've seen CVs where for date of birth, instead of putting date of birth, they put a birthday cake. I mean, I've seen all these things. So I think, there's several very good websites by leading universities abroad where they actually have guidelines for you about how to make a good academic CV. And of course, related to CV is also your statement of purpose and your research interests. Also, people don't put things which they could be useful. For example, if they were a teaching assistant in a class, they often don't mention that, or they don't mention that they got poster prizes because they say, oh, this was just my local conference. But these are all things I think you should mention. And if you were a teaching assistant, say what you did. Like if you taught some problem solving sessions, mention that. If you sometimes substituted for the professor when he or she was not there, say that. So these are some of the things I want to say about making a CV.
Yeah. Professor Nayak, publication is an important thing. How does one prepare this list of publications? Does quantity matter, quality? How does one put these things when one is asking for a job, faculty or a postdoc? Is there some numbers or how?
Yeah, so I think Professor Shobhana has really put a very detailed way of describing the CBI. You are right. In fact, it's getting surprised that if you get, the date of birth and things like that, at least in US. So it's not a good idea to put those things, at least when you are applying to US. So coming back to your questions about, how do you, what are the things that you should do in terms of publication? So the first thing is that, you are basically, you are as a candidate, you are against many other candidates, right? So you have to try to draw the first attention to your applications. It could be, postdocs, or it could be faculty. And I think the number is much larger. What we have seen, number of applications is much larger in India compared to, let's say, abroad, that I have seen even in the faculty applications. So your goal is has to really make sure that it gets attention. So coming back to the publications, I think thing that matters is the quality. You might have 10 publications in the very high high trend research and so on, but the quality doesn't really come out, then it puts you off. And in fact, I would say it go against your number of publications. So first thing is the quality. And of course, just publishing one quality paper and trying to get a faculty in physics is going to be difficult, right? So, but I have seen even one publications, getting a postdoc is not unheard of, because that you are early in your career, just one publication, and it's a very good publications, because it's essentially your peers review. I mean, whether it's good or bad, I think what I've seen over the last few years, this impact factor and, highlighting impact factor, all those things, I never came across about those things, at least in the US, in terms of either faculty candidate applications, nor in postdoc applications. Because if I am a candidate, I'm applying to a group, they know what is the impact factor of the journal that I'm publishing. So identifying those, really, I mean, you can do it, but it doesn't make any sense, right? So that is one thing. The second thing I would say, networking, not in a bad way, but really when you get an opportunity to go to meetings, conference, that's your time to get the attention for particularly for postdocs, even for the faculty positions, right? Because as I said, you have so many applicants, going for the same job, and even for the postdoc. Let's talk about postdoc and then faculty. What we have seen, it matters, at least my experience, and I have seen, some of the students, that they have applied. First, of course, your quality of the work, so publications. The second is the reference letter. All of you know, the reference letter is the single most criteria that we see in the US, apart from your CV, because your CV just tells you the attention, and then the reference letter, and the third is the meeting. So why I said that, the networking, you might get the first through your publication. The second one you can get through your reference letter. But if you meet the person in a meeting and so on, and just a half-an-hour meeting and just interactions, and that basically clears. So these three things, in my opinions, makes your entire application very strong.
Yeah, so Dr. Desai, one other question which comes to the mind of the participants is, suppose I'm offered a postdoc or a faculty, should I negotiate for salary and other remunerations, or when do I do it? Yeah.
So again, this really depends a lot, first of all, on the country and the culture of the country that you're in. So in India and in most European countries, a lot of these salaries are paid out of public money and the scales are fixed. So there is no room for negotiation whatsoever. It is just in America, in my limited knowledge, it's just in America where these things seem to be fairly negotiable. And there, I think you would be, but I mean, you should take advice from someone who has lived in that system a bit more. But I think for both Indian and European positions, yeah, you don't really need to negotiate on the salary, but it always helps to talk with your host and to understand what exactly is involved. Understand, for example, whether the salary that you're offered is enough to meet the day-to-day expenses of the place that you're going to. I think this is something a lot of people miss if they're moving abroad, which is they just translate the money into Indian rupees, and then that's a big number, and they don't really realize what daily expenses are in that particular country. And so you might end up with a situation where you're not even able to come home at the end of your postdoctoral stay. You have not saved enough money. So you don't want to be in that situation. So do a little bit of background research of what exactly you're being offered. You may be able to negotiate something like travel grants. So for example, the place that you're going to might have some bunch of money that they have some freedom to allocate based on who needs it. So maybe you can negotiate that you want to travel to a conference once a year or whatever, and use that wisely. So that's possible. But I mean, not always, it doesn't always 100% work, but that's something you can always bring up.
Okay. Professor Narasimhan, you nicely put what are the things required in CV. There's one question I would take here. What a good effective SOP, statement of purpose, would contain? That's a question if you would like to.
Okay, so I think first of all, it should be clear to people that a statement of purpose is what you want to do in the future and not what you have already done. This seems obvious to me, but from the statements of purpose that I sometimes see, this doesn't seem to be clear to everyone. And of course, a statement of purpose is different when you're applying for a PhD position, when you are applying for a postdoc, and when you're applying for a faculty position. When you are applying for a PhD position, I think it is okay to be fairly general. Like, you don't have to say, I want to work on the applications of noble metal nanoparticles in photocatalysis or something like that. I mean, I think it is good to be a little bit broad. And you can even say that you are at present, I think it would be good to say 2 or 3 things that attract you and why they attract you. But at the end, I think it is always good to have a sentence saying that however, you have an open mind, and if other opportunities should open up, you are willing to consider them. Because unless you're applying to work with just one particular professor, you do not know. That professor may not have funds, that professor may not have a position. So you should keep your mind open. I mean, like, I did my PhD in the US, and I went there intending to do either particle physics or astrophysics, and I ended up doing condensed matter physics. And so you don't know what will happen, you know, what direction your career will proceed in, and don't close off options. As a postdoc, of course, you are applying to a specific group, and then you should read the papers of that group and make it clear why you want to work in that group. And you should say what skills you bring to the project you want to work with, and what you would like to learn, and why you think it is an interesting problem, I think. And if you are applying for a faculty position, then it's a much more ambitious thing. Then you shouldn't, again, I think, narrow it down too much and say, I want to work on this particular problem which is very, very focused. You should, I mean, they're going to presumably employ you for the rest of your career. So you should have a long-term prospect of which direction you want to go in and why. And then maybe you can say in the short term, say over the next 5 years or so, what are some of the problems you might look at?
Yeah, thank you. Professor Srinivasan, one question is doing postdocs better abroad and than in India? How does it help in career progression? Yeah.
Nowadays, you know, you have this PMRF and other very exotic postdoctoral fellowships available in India. So they are actually as good as doing it abroad, in my opinion. Okay. The only thing is that, you know, just like when you take your PhD, the one thing that is very important is the kind of institution, and second thing is the person with whom you are going to do the research with. These are very important when you do your PhD. Similarly, in the postdoc also it matters. Like, you know, with your background, you're going to an institution, and that institution, suppose it has the kind of facilities that you are looking for, because some of them are maybe not have the kind of facilities that you're looking for. It may just be a dream, or some places may have a specific kind of requirement where you can fit in also. So I have seen many such cases where in India also people have foregone their postdoctoral fellowship abroad and kind of, you know, taken it in India. And that is one thing. And the second thing is when you actually stay in India, you come with a kind of, you know, kind of an impression that, you know, that you want to settle down. If you still want to float around, I think it's better to go abroad and then try other opportunities. But if you feel that it's time for you to kind of settle down, get into a job, it's better try for something in the Indian scenario.
Okay, Professor Nayak, there are some also very interesting sort of policy related questions from the participant. One of them is the number of PhDs awarded per year is increasing. So is the quality of PhD graduates also improving at the same rate, or universities are just adopting some minimum criteria to award PhD and they are awarding? So basically, are university institutes nowadays preparing independent thinkers?
Wow, that's a tough question. Right? But it's a very important question, right? So to answer your questions, whether it's going down or going up, it's difficult for me to judge. Really, I mean, it's not I'm trying to avoid the call, but I think it's very difficult because then I have to come up with either way some quantitative number. What I would put the questions a little differently and then come back to the answer. First thing is that whether we should increase the number of PhD. In my opinion, the answer is yes. Right? It's in my mind. Just yesterday we had a different discussion, and someone was saying that how difficult our JEE is, and we should take proud of that, and so on. I just look at differently. I told that the JEE is difficult, yes, compared to let's say Sethi, where students go to MIT. But what it reflects is that we have so many good students, they want to have a reasonable educations, and we are not able to provide them. So we have come out with some mechanism to restrict those numbers. Beyond that, I don't read too much onto this exam pattern and so on. There could be 100 students, one just gets in, and all 99 are equivalent in my mind. I have taught in Princeton 2 years. I have taught 12 years in RPI. I'm taught now 6 years at IIT. You have all the students everywhere, in a sense, it is similar. You have very delta functions, they're bright and super. There are some other students and doing reasonable well, right? So I think as a country, we need to produce more students, right? Now the question comes, what would they do? Just a back of envelope calculation will tell you, I think the first questions that was asked, you can't have academic jobs for all these students. So it's just not possible, right? And no country has able to really do that. So I think what is missing is now the quality of course, the quality has to be maintained. And once you produce so many students, and again, it's up to all of us and beyond us also. We just have to find ecosystems where we have to see this pipe and constructively and get engaged. I think that piece of information is completely missing. And it's not, I'm blaming anybody, because we suddenly started from a system which was closed until 91, and then we opened up, rightly in my opinion. We have huge opportunity, but then we need to ecosystems where we have to see these PhD students where they can be engaged. If you look at Germany, right? I mean, most of the students go to industry, even US and China now, right? So that unless we find that mechanism, I think we'll be struggling to this kind of things. And about this quality, yes, I think the mechanism also has to be developed. As you know, in US, for example, we don't have examiners outside, right? But then how do you maintain this one? Because the quality of that student's thesis is actually reflecting what the PI is doing, and the PI's grant will be renewed based on that one. So that is one mechanism. In Europe, is a little different, for example, right? But if we have to develop a mechanism that is suitable to here based on what we have seen and across the globes, what is the best practice and what we can adopt. So I think, I didn't answer you straight the questions because I think it's a very difficult questions. Yes, I think, if I look around, maybe I will say that, producing too many PhD students have compromised to some extent. But you know what, out of that also, I have large number of students who have come out with a high quality. If I had restricted the students, I will get, let's say, only few students very excellent, but then I not have that number. So I think that is where I will leave it.
Any other panelists would like to add here briefly on this point?
Yeah, I just have a general comment to make, which is that I think we really prematurely judge a lot of students and their potential. I think there is a lot more possible. And also, we are sort of stuck in this mold of the person who does well in written exams, which I think is really bad model for research. A person who does well in exams there is no guarantee that this person is suited for research or is interested in having independent and original ideas. Not usually, but many times students who do well in exams are students who really like to follow an algorithm. So they are very good at following the steps that they are required to follow, but they are not necessarily the same people who we require to make uh, sort of innovative mixtures of things based on the conditions that we have on the ground here. So I think that is something that is really sorely missing. And there is really no need to always keep judging people who is good, who is bad, who is getting 1 mark more, who is getting 1 mark less. I think that is really a pity that we do that.
One other question on such a broad topic is, are there biases when one gets faculty or postdoc jobs? From the list of questions, there could be societal biases. For example, one of the participants says, physics is not encouraged in middle-class society relative to career in professional courses. There could be also married people getting jobs together at the same place. Is that also an issue? So another participant writes, gender is no longer considered as binary. Are there any special provisions made to ensure we start supporting transgender education and help them in securing PhD positions and other things? So Dr. Narasimhan, would you like to comment on this? Yeah.
Okay. So I wish I could say, okay, so there are two parts of the question. One is about whether families encourage their children to go into academia or not. Yeah, many times they don't. And some of it is a lack of information. They just don't know enough about academia. The other is that in academia, you get your permanent job really very late compared to other fields. So you have to do this PhD, which takes a long time. Then you do a postdoc, then maybe you do another postdoc. Sometimes you do a third postdoc. And families start getting really impatient and nervous. And they say, what are you doing? You're so old. We are getting old. We are ill. We want to see you married. We want to see you in a job. And I have seen my male and female students come under tremendous pressure from their parents to quit academia, to quit their PhDs sometimes, or after a PhD not to go into academia even when they're very keen for this reason. I don't have a solution for this. Sometimes one can try to talk to the parents, but there's only so much one can do. I mean, you can't tell your students, ignore parents, they don't know anything. So this is a problem that I'm still grappling with. About biases in hiring, I wish I could say there are no biases, but I think there are. They may not necessarily be explicit biases, like people may not say, no, I will never hire somebody who is a woman, or no, I will never hire someone who is trans or who is gay. But I think there are implicit biases. It is hard, I think, to get a job if you are a woman. I think it is very hard to get 2 jobs in the same city if you are a couple. Also, your choices are limited because many institutions believe that you should not hire couples. Some institutions, like I believe CSR has a rule that you cannot hire couples. Some institutions don't have a written rule. They just have an unwritten policy that this should be avoided. So it is very hard because in many cities, I mean, if you're in a big city like Mumbai or Bangalore or Delhi, you can hope that there are 2 institutions where you could get a job, like one could get a job in JNC, one could get a job in IISER or NCBS or something. But if you're in a small city, smaller city like, I don't know, Dhanbad or Allahabad even, there may be just one place where you feel is good enough for you both to work in. And so that is a real problem. About people who are LGBTQ, I think this is an area where we are just beginning to be aware of it. Most people are not even aware that this is an issue. I have sometimes been consulted by students who are gay or trans or gender fluid, and we really don't have any policies in mind. The question asked whether there could be reservations for such people. I think we are at a state of awareness where many people making hiring decisions are completely unaware that this can even be an issue. Like, you know, they say, what do you mean gender fluid? What does it mean to be gender fluid? And I think, sadly, the situation is still that there is a lot of bias against such people. And though you may not hear someone say, no, I will not hire someone because they're LGBTQ, I think the sad situation on the ground is that it would probably be harder for them to obtain a position if they were to identify themselves as belonging to the LGBTQ community.
Dr. Desai, you want to add something to these points?
I think Professor Narasimhan has done an excellent job of of summarizing the situation. So yeah, I don't have anything specific to add.
Then I just wanted to know if persons like me can make any comments or ask some questions.
You can, yeah, please. Yeah, please ask.
Yeah, there are 2 points. The last 2 questions we discussed, I would like to make some comments and also ask the questions to Professor Narasimhan and others. First point was that number of PhDs, people doing PhDs, PIs, projects, etc. As I see, we do compromise with the quality of PhDs because it adds a value to PIs chromosome, how many PhD is produced. And I have a feeling about this, that it's not if the PI's job to guide the student. Let's say, I'm trying to say, guide the student, and producing PhD has different meaning. Just like we do BSc, MSc, etc., the student has come to earn a PhD degree. If he or she is good enough to find the problem to solve it, the guide's job is to guide him or her how to go around it. The moment our system gives credit for the student's PhD to the faculty member or the PI, in that case there is a problem. It is automatically diluted. You will see that a student has taken 7, 8 students. All the papers are common except 1 or 2 different. So all 8 of them get the PhDs, but that is not what we wanted. That a person like me who is a director of an institute is trying to understand that why it is this. And I think because the rule makers give points to number of PhD you have produced, and that's the reason dilution comes. And it's all of us to think about it, how to stop it. And my message is clear. I have given a faculty member a job. His job is also to guide the students. The students' achievements should not be added to the guide's credit. Number 1, that is this point, these things. And the last issue we discussed about the gender issue, transgender issue, etc., and even couples. In these institutes, I strongly view that what are the couples issue? There are 2 different CVs, there are 2 different people. What can I do now if I hire, suppose, a young man and a young girl, different, they got the job, they get married. Am I going to throw them out from the institute because they got married? If that is not the case, who says me that I cannot hire them? In fact, one of your panelists is sitting there. I had offered her a job and her husband. They choose a different place. That is depending on their convenience. I am also heard of, Madam mentioned that CSR has written rule. If such written rule exists anywhere, I think I would like to go to the court and try to find out that, try to object it. If we are not doing, we know the problems, but we are sitting with it. Why? Then we academicians are supposed to be blamed for it.
Yeah.
Please, let's talk it loudly. Two different people, whether they are husband and wife or brother and sister, etc., judge them on their CV, on their merit, not because they are, if the husband and wife cannot get the job, then we should then decide that one should get married. Tomorrow someone will write a rule that if you are married, I will not hire you. Is this acceptable to us? And it's a generalization of this. Professor Narasimhan mentioned it, but the point is, most of this, including me, including the host, we are academic members, we have not raised the voice in the right platform. In fact, I don't mind even taking, I am so irritated with these points, husband, wife can't get the jobs in the same place, etc. And about the gender issue, people thinking that women can't do research, etc. So where do we go? I'm not we. I am a director. I am making my rules here. How come such rules don't come to my institute? Why it is happening in other places? That too, written rule. If there is a written rule, it's our responsibility to fight it out if necessary legally. And if we are not doing it, we should blame ourselves. And we are doing injustice to our sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters. Thank you very much.
I think those are all good points, and participants certainly will feel encouraged when it comes from a director of an institute who decides hiring. So things are changing, all that I want to say. I think all panelists will agree, and IPA is playing an important role in that change. And through these inputs, I think IPA will also actively contribute to see that things are done in proper perspective. So I think we are running out of time. I think we took all the questions almost in the chat, and okay, Vandana says yes, all points noted for IPA. So with this, I would like to thank all the panelists for giving your valuable time and discussing your experiences and thoughts with the young participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just add one small point?
Yeah, please.
See, yeah. I'm sorry, I have been very specific to the Indian academia, especially on the CFTA, not on the abroad and the postdoctoral things. What I want to point out is in the recruitment side, the government, of course, we are all government-driven institutions. Recently, for example, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make any different statement. Only thing, the fact I'm telling you. There have been a small problem with IITs. Earlier there was only an insistence that no reservations were not made compulsory in IIT recruitment, faculty recruitment. But in the last year or so, the government is coming very strongly onto us. And you could have seen that a lot of special drive advertisements are being made from almost all IITs. So this is another opportunity to break that shackles of reservation and that preferred choices. They are slowly breaking down. Of course, it'll take more time for things to come to the normalcy, but there are a lot of opportunities now for people in the reservation category to apply specifically under special drives in almost all IITs and CFTIs. This is only one point I want to tell all the job seekers. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Srinivasan, that's a very good point. And indeed, we see a lot of advertisements with special drives. Okay, so thank you so much for joining this panel discussion.
Thank you.